Good day. If you are a student of history or you love history like I do, you probably would have read about so many powerful kings over time and powerful political leaders. You would also probably have read about some of them and their wives. For me, one particular political leader or one particular king or sultan I always defer to, I always call up to in history is Suleiman the Magnificent. Suleiman the Magnificent is one of the greatest warriors of 16th century Ottoman Empire. He expanded what today is known as present-day Turkey more than any other person. He left a legacy that is still there in Turkey, in Istanbul, for you to see, at least in the Süleymaniye Mosque and so many other things. He was a great man. And as a great man, he also had a great wife. His wife, Roxelena, was Ukrainian, but she turned out to be one of the greatest wives of the Ottoman Empire, and she left a legacy. In fact, she has a burial chamber very close to Suleiman's mosque, there in the Süleymaniye Mosque. Suleiman's mausoleum, sorry, in the Süleymaniye Mosque there in Istanbul. It's one of the most visited sites in the world. In fact, it's a United Nations heritage site. Why do I bring the matter of an influential woman like Rosalena up? She was called Harem Sultana. Because it recently emerged that President Trump has just told us that his wife, Melania Trump, has not been too happy with him regarding his actions with Putin. It was at a moment that he blurted it out and he said that Melania has not been happy with him because Putin has been bombing Ukraine and he hasn't been taking action. That gave us an insight to the role that Melania is playing in this Ukraine war. You see, Melania Trump, who got married to President Trump in 2005, who as his third wife, and who is the mother of Baron Trump, has maintained a low profile. She came from a background where she was a model, so she had history. But in politics, she really doesn't play so much of it. Reluctantly, this time around, she has been showing herself, and this issue of the Ukraine war has become a reality that she's now playing in. So, when we got this insight that Melania Trump is not happy with Donald Trump, I got to thinking she's beginning to flex much more than we know. You see, Melania Trump is from Slovenia. Slovenia fell under the orbit of the Soviet Union in those days. They were part of the old Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia was one of the countries of the Warsaw Pact. Slovenia is a new country. It came out of the breakup of Yugoslavia in 1991. But as a country that fell under the orbit of the Soviet Union, they have history with the Russians. That history had always been quiet, though. That history had been one where they were friendly to each other, but they've always had tensions. They've had periods of friendliness and tension. In recent times, though, just like many of the countries that formed the part of Eastern Europe, they too have taken a hard view to Russia. So this revelation that Melania Trump is now trying to influence Trump in taking a decision against the Russians, a more hardline decisions against the Russia, got me thinking as to how far Trump can go. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ibima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the opinions I express on this channel, please do well to leave them in the comment section. Today, I want to explore if President Trump can actually stop this war. While he was campaigning, he said that he will stop this war in the very first few days of his presidency. He's far away from it. The forces that are driving this war is way more than he can even imagine. But over the course of time, we got to find out also that the war, rather than finding peace, he has tried to say that he has come to try and make peace for between the Ukrainians and the Russians. But rather than finding a way towards peace, a path towards peace, it's attempts at escalation that we keep hearing about. It was also revealed recently that Zelensky wants Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawk missiles is one of America's intermediate range missiles that has a range of around 1,500 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers. That means it can go pretty much a large part of the Russian country. Trump was asked Zelensky if he can hit Moscow. That report came also recently. And he said, yes, he can if he has the arms and the weaponry, given, obviously, ostensibly given to him by America. He had asked Biden for the Tomahawk missiles before. Biden sidestepped that. And he has also asked Trump. And Trump said that's not going to happen. At least that's what Trump has told the public so far. Tomahawk missiles will only mean an escalation because he wants to hit Moscow. He probably wants to hit other sites in within the Russian continent that produce arms, probably in the Urals, probably in Siberia. That's his intention. He really wants to escalate this war. I don't think an action, a need, an intent at escalation shows that it signals any move towards peace. I am of the belief that peace is not going to come. Trump cannot do anything regarding peace with this war. I sincerely think that any attempt, all his attempts at war, in fact, I think this war will last much longer than any person is conjecturing. The Russians, in a statement by one of their leaders, Zelensky, really recently said that they are looking to the model of Catherine the Great, where she fought a war for 21 years in order to win a territory that she coveted. So when I look at it and say this war is not ending and there's nothing Trump can do about it, let me lay some of the facts as to regards to what are the drivers of this war so that we can understand what is really driving this war. This war with Russia has been one that has been coming for a long time. The Russians, over the course of 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union, made a concerted effort at trying to build better relationships with the West. But all that effort was snubbed. We should understand that the West does not particularly see Russians as part of the Caucasian part. There's a racial element to it. There's a racial element that looks at Russians as not part of the European continent. They feel that they are more, a lot of people, a lot of anthropologists and politicians and all think that thinkers in Europe think that Russians are more affiliated towards Europe. After all, I mean Asia, a larger part of the Russian state is in Asia. Attempts over the past 30 years by Putin, because he had been president for 25 of those 30 years, to make relationships with the West has been snubbed repeatedly, and unfriendly actions had expanded. The countries, particularly that have now stood against better relationship with Russia, include UK, France, and Germany. These countries, we should know, are countries that have the economies, at least that of every country has their own need for Russian oil. For the UK, because that's the home ground of many investors who tend to want to buy oil wells and oil. They look at the covet Russia's riches in minerals and oil and look at a situation where they can continue to get rent. For those people who study political science, they call it rent-free. Rent-free, they buy a mine and then they make money off the proceeds of that mine. That has been one of the biggest reasons why most times you see UK very interested in mines. They are interested in gold mines, diamond mines, oil wells, and all those things that are minerals that are sold. financiers in UK, especially now that the UK economy is one that is financialized, devoid of manufacturing, uh, look at Russia as a big honeypot. As for the Germans, it was the Russian oil also that prompted Germany then under Hitler to invade. They wanted access to Russian oil. Russian oil has always been a problem to them. Even the brief moment of detente and the brief friendship with Germany was prompted on the fact that Russia had a lot of gas that they were selling to Europe and made Germany competitive when that gas was flowing into Germany. But that time is over. Now it is this same Germany under a new chancellor that has become the most belligerent opponent of Russia. Friedrich Merz has signaled that he will take up all the fight of Ukraine. He is now the biggest cheerleader of Ukraine. He has decided also that he's going to give Ukraine more armory. He pledged 5 billion the other day. He has expanded the German army, the German military budget to 88 billion, in fact, and he's trying to double it. He wants it to get to 3.5% of budget. The same thing too, he wants to increase the size of the German military to 200,000 men by volunteering or by conscription. He has become very, very, very belligerent against the Russians. And I don't think that is going to. That has now signaled a point where the Russians now consider the Germans the most dangerous country out there towards them. As regards to France, France also has a history. France has a suite of investors who also have a large amount of investment in Ukraine. And for France, their role as the big player in Europe makes them feel that they should stand up to Russia. France, obviously, by the fact that they are one of the nuclear armed countries in Europe, them and the United Kingdom feel that they have a responsibility to stand up to Russia. In fact, recently, France and Britain signed an agreement where they have agreed to coordinate their nuclear arsenal and their nuclear weaponry in case of any attack on one of the two. It's a bilateral agreement signed by Starmer and Macron recently in London. As regards to the UK, like I said, I'd already said, the fact that they are financiers, they have a lot of interest in present day Ukraine. They have a lot of mines that they control in the Donbas region of Ukraine. And that interest in the Donbas region of Ukraine has led them to invest so much, either in expectation of returns or in the hope that they will control these mines, but that has gone. One of the mines recently was taken over by the Russians in the region of Chechenko, which is a lithium mine, one of the biggest in the world. This has been the minerals that the United Kingdom financiers covet, but that's no more. And when you look at also the fact that the Eastern European countries were part of the Russian bloc, the Russian sphere of influence. In fact, 14 countries that are now in NATO were once part of the Warsaw Pact, led by Poland and Hungary. These countries have had long histories with Russia. They have had a history with Tsarist Russia and also history with Soviet Russia. And that history has made them find an organization where they can, one, be protected and possibly, if anything, take revenge. The countries that are really, really curious in their behavior are the Baltic countries of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. These countries are very small, but despite their size, they have had a very long and harrowing history with the Russians. And this history is compelling them, first, compel them to become members of NATO, and also make them become one of the most belligerent and most biggest opponents of Russia. The Ukraine war has given them an opportunity to call on NATO to destroy Russia on their behalf. But now that President Trump is thinking of moving away from that war, he's talking about peace, he's talking about ending the war, they are really worried and they are bothered that maybe if this war ends, they will be now the focus of the Russians. For that reason, they will have an interest in wanting this war to continue because they still have an end point in mind, the destruction of Russia. Kaya Kallas, the EU foreign minister, has said repeatedly that she wants Russia destroyed and dismembered, broken into smaller constituent states. That is one of the goals of these small countries made up of populations of 2-3 million people. They got into the NATO Union seeking revenge. In fact, when they were being um, inducted into NATO, a lot of people wondered what they were going to bring into it. They were just going to bring access to the Russian border. That has also become the lot of the Finns. Finland has also recently joined NATO, and Finland has a big history with Russia. So many of these countries in Eastern Europe have history with Russia, either as Tsarist states or Soviet Union. They need revenge. They have anger. They have history that is making them hateful of Russia. And for that reason, this attack or these events or the crisis going on in Ukraine is an excuse to call on the Americans to come and destroy Russia on their behalf. If they form a union together collectively under the framework of Article 5, it is expected that they, collective West, can defeat Russia. But that is not what has been happening in the past 3 years. Nobody foresaw the resilience of the Russian economy. Nobody foresaw the ability of the Russians to move into a war mode, increase and rejig their manufacturing and start to output artillery and weapon systems at the rate they are doing now, that they now outpace European production on a 3-to-1 basis. They are now by far the strongest economy and the strongest in manufacturing and military force in Europe. There's no country that can stand up to them. This is not causing any ease of mind for the Eastern Europeans. The only country in the Eastern Europe that has tried to maintain a middle way and become friends with the Europeans is Hungary. Hungary and Slovakia have said that this war is inimical and all the policies of EU is inimical to the interest of the Europeans. They've lost energy. They have lost gas. They now buy gas at a higher rate. They are being deindustrialized. And they are the ones who are suffering from the blowback of the 22,000 rounds of sanctions. Slovakia, in these last few days, chose not to approve the 18th round of sanctions being sponsored by the EU, making Kaya Kallas to complain and feel very, very dejected that European countries should continue to fight against Russia and rally support for Ukraine. Ukraine, on its own hand, Zelensky particularly, the Zelensky government has a very strong incentive to continue to be in government because Zelensky has already fallen out of his first term. He has refused to host election. And there's uncertainty as to what fate may befall him if he leaves, if he makes peace with the Russians. Already his government has been taken over by ultranationalists, the Banderites as they call them, people who form the Third Azov Brigade. There's a strong swell of nationalist elements around his government now, and they have threatened many repeatedly that if he makes peace with the Russians, they may assassinate him. That is a tough one for him to navigate. And even if the Americans may try to protect him, we know of the long reach of these vengeful characters. So, but even outside Ukraine and all the fears of Zelensky, let's come to America now. They have as many people in America who have an interest in war to continue. I have said before that there are some elements that may not be palatable to discuss, but truly there is a Jewish element to this war. The Israelis have taken the part of supporting Ukraine, and the Israelis, to a large extent, are promoting a lot of insurgency against Russia. Why will there be such a very powerful Israeli element to this Ukrainian war, or even a Jewish element to it? Well, let me explain one thing. There was a time when there was a lot of oligarchs who got happy and became beneficiaries of the Ukrainian system, of the Russian system. Putin, in his power grab and his growth as a leader, took a lot of the mines and the oil wells that had been given to these oligarchs at the early stages, investigated them, and many of them ran to Israel. Besides that, also, a lot of Jews moved to Israel from former Eastern European countries. There's a lot of history between Israel and the Jewish state. I mean, Russia and the Jewish state. We know of the pogroms in Odessa, and this is one unrelenting anger and animosity that still continues to be there. So we have the element of the emigres who were once oligarchs. They have a large amount of them in Israel, and for them, Putin is not a friend. And anything that will lead to the destruction of Putin is something they subscribe to. So we see them relentlessly in the Mossad now, making operations against supporting Ukraine with alternative methods of fighting the war, methods that the Russians call terrorism. Their hand, as we saw, there was a big correlationship, there was a big relationship similarity between the Operation Spiderweb against the nuclear fleet of bomber fleet of Russia and the events that happened in Iran during the 12-day war. So when you come to America also, you have this same group of financiers now, mainly in New York and in America. Let's not forget that BlackRock, to a large extent, is a Jewish organization. BlackRock had great investments they looked forward to having a very good time in Ukraine. That has been put on hold now. They had to stop their fund for the reconstruction of Ukraine. They are not doing it anymore. The same also is in the political class in America here, where we have the neocons. The neocons have become an infrastructure that opposes any government that challenges or complains of America's heavy hand anywhere in the world, be it in Ukraine, be it in Venezuela, in Iran. And if you dare raise your voice against America, even in a far-flung place like South Sudan, you will see the full brunt of the policies crafted by the neocons in nice offices in Washington, D.C. That is who they are. They believe completely and totally on American hegemony. The neoconservatives do not like the fact that over the course of several years, Putin intervened in Libya, he intervened in Syria. He was trying to undermine American strength and power. He's not a good man in their eyes, and he should be eliminated. They don't want this war to end. And they are the ones who continue to circle around President Donald Trump all the time, led by the face of the neocons, Lindsey Graham, and a very big critic of Donald Trump whenever he doesn't take an action against Putin, Bolton. Bolton was his former national security advisor. Now, he is happy anytime that Trump takes a big action against Putin. And then he is very unrelenting in his criticism of Trump anytime he lets Putin off the hook. They don't want this war to end. So the way I see it, no matter how President Donald Trump tries to say that he's going to end this war, the forces that want this war to continue, maybe not necessarily because they are profiting from the war, but because of they are filled with anger, hate, and the need for vengeance against Putin. They alone, they are going to continue to push for the continuation of this war. And obviously, they've recruited a very powerful person next to Trump every night, his wife, Melania Trump, who now is another pressure point in trying to get President Trump, to be decisive in his actions against President Putin and the Russian state. This is where I end my video for today. If you have any comments, please leave them in the comment section. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe. The least you can do is to like and share. Thank you until I see you in my next video. Goodbye.